everybody. We're live. I'm Sully Barbaria.
And I'm Baz Chapman, and we are the joint heads of the Sing Up Foundation. Delighted to be with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you for the launch of our new publication, Being Seen, Being Heard, Feeling Connected. Thanks for taking the time to be here, whether you're on Riverside, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And we've got people joining us from all over the world. We're just so grateful to be able to share this with you. So let's get started.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sally. I'm just going to play you a short film now. What can singing really do for children and young people's mental health and well-being?
We've been talking to practitioners, researchers, and young people, and what we're finding is full of possibility.
Our new publication, Being Seen, Being Heard, Feeling Connected, is a think piece and an invitation from the Sing Up Foundation. It brings together research, practitioner insight, and young people's voices to map out what we're learning.
Across 7 chapters, we explore the landscape, what works, who benefits, and what vocal leaders need.
Real voices run through every section, practitioners sharing what they see, young people describing what they feel.
We're discovering that when young people struggle, what they're often experiencing is disconnection. And singing has this remarkable capacity to reconnect across multiple dimensions, all at once.
But it doesn't happen automatically. The practitioner matters, the space matters, the relationship matters.
We've mapped out where the evidence is strong, where practice is running ahead of research, and where we need to go next.
Music kind of became my safety net that I could fall back on every time life was getting too much. Every time I'd get a bit panicky over things going on, I was like, okay, let's just write something down. I just kind of use that energy to make it into something that I enjoy.
If you've experienced trauma, it's actually really difficult to build intimacy with people at a psychological level because you don't necessarily know how much you can trust other people. So in a singing situation, it's like a kind of safe danger. You can choose how much you commit yourself into the group singing.
Exploring your own experience through music is a passport to freedom. It's a passport to finding a sense of value and that actually you can play a part in society and actually you belong.
This publication doesn't have all the answers, but it maps the territory honestly and suggests ways forward.
As work continues on our evolving practitioner framework, we present this publication for everyone who works with children and young people through singing and vocal work, and everyone who supports them. And we invite you to get involved.
Being seen, being heard, feeling connected. Read it.
Explore it.
Share it. Join the conversation. Okay, so before we hand across to the panel, I'm just going to do a little bit more of an introduction to what the publication itself actually is. This is a synthesis and I suppose a snapshot of everything that we've learned so far about singing and vocal work and its ability to support children and young people's mental health. We've drawn on a huge range of sources, the conversations we've had, our podcast, our roundtables, the reports that we've read, and the published research that's out there. And I'm just going to share with you now 6 of the key findings from the report. There are many more, but these, I think, give a good taste of what this is about. There remains a mental health need. We surveyed the subscribers to the Sing Up Foundation at the end of last year, and 71% of them described mental health challenges for the children and young people in their settings as severe or very severe. So we are in an ongoing crisis of mental health for our young people. And how we respond to a crisis, of course, is different from how we would respond to a general need. Exploring where singing and vocal work can fit possibly at the front line of that crisis is what the report is about. How deep can we go into mental health challenges with this work and be able to transform young people's lives, or fit in with the broader tapestry of what's on offer? And yes, policy is changing. The system is doing its best to adapt, but it's not there yet. And there's much that we can do. Singing for well-being and singing for mental ill health are not the same thing. So an upbeat song with a feel-good vibe might work brilliantly for some people, but for young people who are really struggling, it might not, or in fact, it might have a detrimental effect. Of course, it's about more than just repertoire, but it's a really important aspect to understand what going deeper into this work actually means. Connection is a huge thing that's come out of this, and the fact that mental health can cause and be caused by disconnection, and yet we know that singing can cause connection in so many ways. There surely must be a way to bring the two together, and we explore this through a theory of connection. That links also to the published research that's out there, and there's all kinds of research, as you probably know, into the benefits of singing and vocal work, much of which is actually published on our website. But across all of the research, the really strong evidence and consistent evidence is around social connection and belonging. And of course, that presents a wonderful opportunity. Safety, a safe space is really important. And we've done some great work with Blue Cabin and created some resources around what we actually mean by a safe space in this context. And we link to that from the report, but it covers multiple dimensions. And then finally, in that same survey that I mentioned, 82% of respondents said they believe that singing has a strong role to play in mental health, but only 26% said they felt very confident to do it. That's a huge gap. And that's why our real focus from here is on the practitioner and whoever they may be, whether they are a teacher, a professional music leader, or whoever. How can we best equip them to help to work more and more effectively within this space? And also, how can we make sure that they are properly supported? We don't have full evidence yet of this, but we suspect that while some organisations are brilliant at providing wellbeing support for practitioners, we sense that there is a lot more that can be done, and some areas where it's not happening as well as it should be. If we're dealing with young people in a difficult place, we must support our workforce. So that's one of the key strands that we'll be picking up next. But enough from me. Let's now hear from the panel. And I'm delighted to hand across to someone who's been a part of Sing Up since, well, before day one. Katherine Zeserson, over to you.
Thank you, Baz. And it's really a pleasure to meet you all, however virtually we're meeting. Yes, I've been with Sing Up since before it existed. And I'm really proud and happy to be the chair of the group of Sing Up Limited. And within that, we have a separate chair of the foundation. We're going to hear from panelists. I'm going to facilitate a bit of discussion between them. And then I'm going to be inviting questions periodically from the floor. But I'm also going to be addressing questions to you all as well, so that we can hear some of your thinking about all of these matters. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Benjamin Turner, founder of Rap Club and Spit Game, whose work uses rap, beatboxing, and creative vocals to build connection and confidence with young people. Great to see you, Benjamin. And we have Professor Graham Welch, Chair of Music Education at UCL Institute of Education, one of the world's leading researchers on singing and child development, and probably been around Sing Up even longer than me, probably more than 20 years of supporting this journey. So Graham, welcome to you. It's wonderful to see you all here. So we're going to start up with Benjamin is going to give us a couple of minutes of his take on the report and perhaps wider context. Over to you, Benjamin.
Great, thank you. So with the report, I found the report really aligning with a lot of what I see in the schools and with the young people that I work with. The thing which I found really important was how it focused on the conditions being crucial. And so I want to just say something about what we're seeing are those conditions that we're up against, as well as the mechanism that we're finding is driving a lot of the behavior and the kind of well-being and youth distress issues at the moment. From what we're seeing, young people today aren't really disengaging from creativity. Rather, they're adapting to an environment where being seen carries a real risk, but also is kind of intrinsic to being and to existing. Youth culture today runs on kind of two engines. One is success culture, which is the need to be immediately seen to be successful without any of the process. And then on the other hand, there's humiliation culture, where if any mistake, even if it's not a mistake, can be turned into something which defines that person as a joke. And you can see that in terms of the content that goes viral and in terms of which young people are gravitated towards. And what we find is that the survival response to both of those is something which we're calling BOV culture, which if you work in a London school, you might have heard young people saying BOV. But essentially the performance of not caring or being excellently non-excellent. And what often teachers, myself included when I was teaching, would see as disengagement or just being a teenager. What we're finding is more actually a survival strategy of self-preservation. And that's the environment that we're in, where young people are restricting themselves from their creativity and from their kind of openness as a survival mechanism based on the world that they're living in. Another way of looking at it is that we're living in the world of the edit, where young people are navigating a space where everything is filtered, everything is controlled, everything is performative. And again, I highlight that that's not some kind of laziness. It is a survival mechanism within the conditions that the report really excellently highlights. It's why you will see a young person recording a TikTok 20 times and then post it for millions, but will not be prepared to perform in front of their peers in a room. And so what the report, I feel, is showing is how is the need for these spaces for unedited space. And one of the most powerful unedited forms is the voice. It's unedited creativity, it's unedited sound, it's unedited kind of process where your voice is you. And that can be both very distressing and in the modern world is really something which young people are even more going to be opposed to, but at the same time is exactly the conditions that we need to support them to learn how to navigate that reality. And I feel that what the report intrinsically is showing is that we need to approach these creative spaces the right way, but they also are arguably the best setup spaces to ask a young person to stop performing, support them in how to remove the mask, but also so that they can learn to put down the mask and to be unedited and to create. Where the conditions are right in that space, young people won't step away from the edit because they're asked to step away from it. They're going to choose to step away because the conditions have made a space where they can be. And unfortunately, in the world that they're living in, they don't have enough spaces to be real. And that's one of the powers of singing, where it is intrinsically a real experience. So that's kind of the finding that I'm finding with it, and how it's giving me a tool to be able to talk about a lot of the issues and the environment that we're seeing for the young people we're working with.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And I've written so many things down to ask you further about, and I'm sure colleagues not visible are doing the same thing. So keep your notes so we can come back to Benjamin and ask him some more about those really fascinating points. Graham, over to you. First responses to the report.
Yes, well, this is a very welcome opportunity to reflect on the intrinsic and wider benefits of singing, and also the excellent work of Sing Up and its foundation. So this is greetings from me from St Agnes Catholic Primary School in Tower Hamlets, where I'm working with a colleague today and tomorrow. We're researching aspects of children's rhythm, but we're also regularly in here. We've been researching aspects of children's singing, well-being, and mental health. So reading this report prompted a few thoughts based on my personal and professional experiences. First of all, perhaps something for the adults in the room. That as a school governor, I recognise that schools are under enormous financial pressure, with increased costs and limited income, challenges with special educational needs, for example. So staff, and including senior leadership teams, can also benefit equally from collective singing, such as with their pupils, which can also enhance the sense of being part of this shared community. So it isn't just for the children and the young people, it's also for the adults in the room, and doing it collectively might be just that kind of fun thing which eases some of the tensions of the day and reminds people why they went into education in the first place. I'm also very willing to acknowledge in the report that the repertoire choices, which give pupils voice in all senses, are important to support their engagement, especially during adolescence. And this can reduce something that we often see in schools, this sense of my music or their music, and have a greater sense of our music that we own and share collectively. I also wondered about how IT can support collective singing, especially for those non-confident adults working with young people. We've had nearly 100 years now of BBC broadcasts for schools, as well as more recent sing-up resources, which demonstrate that we can sing along with media, which can be purposeful, engaging, fun, as well as being educational. Hundreds of years ago, when I was a primary school teacher in inner London, singing together and time and tune were absolutely wonderful resources for me. One other thing that was picking up what Baz said is that many years ago, in 1979, a psychologist called Antonovsky offered the concept of salutogenesis, which focuses on the origins of health rather than focusing on the causes of disease and ill health. And one of those in this concept is a sense of coherence, of the world being somehow comprehensible, manageable, enabling us better to deal with life stresses. So we need these kind of generalized as well as specific resistance resources to enable us to look after our health, to be positive, as Baz was suggesting. I also like, and I'm delighted to see Benjamin here, that the report stresses that it's voice work, including singing, with many different kind of multi-genre examples. I mean, I can remember being in Northwest USA where it was common for schools to engage in vocal jazz in a way which I hadn't come across in the UK. It's also to see wonderful work in beatboxing going on, for example, including with clinical and neurodivergent children, young people and adults in London. I also remember that young children will engage in songwriting. I can remember this when I was teaching a class of eight-year-olds, and I've been doing some poetry work with them and some creative writing. And this child came out to read the poem, and she said, "Would you like me to sing it?" So I said, "Oh, well, okay, fine," And then several others stood up and said, "Oh, well, I can sing mine as well." And I suddenly realized that these children were creating poetry, and they had melodies in their heads as they were creating these. So, our kids are musical, aren't they? The research that I've been doing for the Voces 8 Foundation on children's singing, health and well-being suggests that if singing is a normal part of the air that children breathe, it becomes part of who they are, part of their collective identity, which is what Howard Goodall is talking about in this text. And it's also likely to have a preventative role in mental health, supporting a sense of positivity, a sense of belonging and community. And last but not least, picking up one of the other comments in the report, 3 colleagues from the university sector, Spiro, Duncan and Cross, have just published new research in the Journal of Consciousness Studies. And they found that there was no meaningful link between musical accuracy and social connection. So what matters is not singing well, but singing together. So
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. Again, so much to prompt and stimulate our thinking. So I've got a couple of things I'd like to put back to you all 3 just for chat, for conversation, and then we're going to start taking questions from our audience here. So one of the things I'd like to just bring in, and you gave me the perfect segue there, Graham, actually, so thank you for that, is the relationship between the music and the practice of the music. Okay, so if we can see singing and voice work in the context of this report as a practice in which we are engaged. And you could see music as the content of that practice, or you could also see it as the territory for that practice. So you could say that what is asked of us when we sing together is that we engage in behaviors and practices of connection, of listening, of all the things that are articulated in the report. And the territory in which we're doing that is music making. We could also say that there are some very particular qualities of songwriting and text when we bring the meaning making of words to bear on the situation, and so on and so on. I guess my question here is, does the music matter? Does it matter what the music is? And in what ways does it matter, and to whom? And how does the music aid or impede the kind of impact that we're hoping to bring around? I'm going to start with you, Benjamin, and then Baz, and then Graham.
Yeah, I think that's a really important and surprisingly complex question. I think the music doesn't matter until it matters too much to the facilitator. But I specifically am talking about the facilitator. So the approach that I take with the work that we do, we make films as well as doing music. So we're kind of just a creative hub, and the whole approach is youth leadership and youth led. And so for me, for example, I wanted to do a jazz club at the beginning. Young people weren't particularly engaging with that, didn't really want to do that. They wanted to do rap. And what I had to do was to step back and recognize, as much as I, at the time, had no idea anything about rap, it was my responsibility to facilitate that space. And so, yeah, in that way, young people being given the opportunity to lead and explore what music means to them and what creativity means, that is where the music itself doesn't matter. But the moment that the space or the facilitator of the space starts to define what music should be done or is welcome, whether or not that's intended, simply pushing for, right, this is a piece of music we're going to do, you're saying quite a lot about what that space is welcoming, what that space is prioritizing, valuing. And the implication of that isn't a spoken implication, but for a young person, it can make them feel, okay, this part of me or this part of my culture is maybe not welcome here, or I don't actually feel aligned to this piece of music, so I'm going to disengage a little bit. Or this piece of music just doesn't feel cool, and I don't want to be seen doing this piece of music, and therefore I don't want to engage. So on that side, it can matter a lot, but I think the easiest route out of it is ultimately giving leadership to the young people themselves. And us recognizing the music doesn't matter to, and shouldn't matter to us, while recognizing it does matter to them.
Great, thank you. A very clear view. Baz, where do you take this point?
Yes, I suppose it depends on the intention. I mean, I know plenty of choral leaders, who are more sort of, here is a group that will learn and rehearse a number of items and possibly perform them. And there are well-being or groups that have a well-being intention about them that do that. I think it's when it becomes something that is either dealing with young people where for whatever reason they're not connecting with that, or where you are having an intention which is more potentially, I hesitate to say therapeutic because we're not talking about music therapy, but where the intention is more about creating a change for those young people, helping to address something that they might be struggling with in their lives. That's where the really skilled practitioner has a range of directions that they can go in, and very occasionally that might be their own introduction of something, but as Benjamin said, it's connecting with what works for those young people. And I would just finish it by saying that one of the main aspects that we talk about with connection theory is that it's all very well saying, well, these connections with singing help to offset these disconnections with mental health issues, but if you don't get the connection right with the young people in the first place, and make them feel like that music is for them and that they belong in that space, then you're never going to achieve those other things. And our podcast with Benjamin, which I would recommend people have a listen to, called Finding Connection, explores all of that and how he went through that journey of going, here's what I think young people like. Oh, they don't. Okay, how am I going to make this work?
Thanks, Baz. Another way of seeing it. And I think it's worth just at this point to re-emphasize a point you make super clearly in the report, which is that you're particularly interested in exploring that what you've described in the report as the tier 3 circumstance. This is where young people's experience of mental ill health is becoming acute or is in some way disconnecting them from their ability to thrive. So this is more than thinking about generalized well-being. It's thinking about facilitation of emergence from or healing through or in something more extreme, perhaps, than that. Graham, your thoughts?
Well, children and young people will always appreciate the fact that you value their music, whatever their music is, the music that they're experiencing and enjoying, and that bringing that into a school setting is a very positive thing. At the same time, if you are involved in education, your role is to develop, extend, is to educate. And so that you're also going to be taking the opportunity to draw parallels perhaps with other music, or to offer up other examples that the children haven't come across. So in a former life, when I was a primary school teacher in Tooting, between the cemetery and the dog track, in a somewhat challenging situation, we did a concert once, which was Love Songs Through the Ages. And these children were singing Dowland and also singing Beach Boys. And the choices were some of mine and some of theirs. It tells you my age. But it was something that seemed to work because they recognized that there could be links in lots of different kinds of musics when you start getting down to the nature of what music is and how it works and how it connects with us.
What a richness of responses. I will add a thought, and then I'm going to go over to you, Sally. I know that we've got some questions in the chat that there may be some that relate to this question of repertoire, and we may broaden out as well. I just wanted to just share a sort of reflection come provocation, I suppose, which is that if we are taking the view, which I think I would support, that your connection theory proposition is explaining a little bit about why singing might be of support and benefit in this context, then there is probably more to ask about the music than simply whether or not young people like it or whether or not it gives them a sense of agency. There may be more to ask about music itself as a medium and the impacts of sounds and combinations of sounds and rhythms and grooves and the ways in which music itself is a physical force that we relate with and relate to. And I know that's a whole other, it's a whole other report, it's a whole other research project. But I think it is interesting because music can disturb us very much, and some people are very disturbed by some kinds of music at a really visceral level. So if we're curating a collective space and we're trying to curate everyone's sense of belonging and everyone's sense of agency and everyone's capacity to grow and heal in a place of connection, we've got to somehow manage that too, that the choices we all make impact on one another. And there may be something more to be learned about the music itself as a material. Sally, would you like to offer us some questions here? You can put them right up on the chat if you like, or if you have someone who wants to ask live, up to you. Sally's sitting in the back here. So I have a question for the panel, please. Should well-being be an explicit part of music education? And if so, how do you think that should be done? Okay, who'd like to kick off on this one?
I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, no, my perspective is that it really shouldn't be explicitly part of it. I think as soon as young people feel like they're in a therapeutic space, that shifts what that space can be. And I think one of the most impactful elements of creative spaces is that they are doing the therapeutic work without having to feel or sound therapeutic. At the same time, I think that the practitioner should be aware of what the overall work is doing and how it is supporting well-being, and the responsibility that carries, and the responsibility to not make a young person feel observed by opening up creatively. So I think it is intrinsic, but it shouldn't be made explicit, if that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Baz, Graham, any thoughts on that question about well-being in education?
Yes, this is a really interesting one where we've been thinking about, like, if there is a case, say within a school or within a group of schools, for saying, okay, there are these young people who are struggling, whatever we might define that as, what could we provide that is more focused for them? How do you do that in a way that doesn't say, you've got a problem, come here, we're going to fix it for you? Even though music making might be a really appealing thing, and I don't think we've necessarily got the answer to that, but I will pick up on something that Graham said, which is that if you are going to be overt about it, get them involved in the design and understanding the research interest in it, rather than just going, we've pre-created this thing for you, which I thought might be an interesting one to explore at some point.
Also, just if I can, if I can just very quickly jump in, an example of an approach that we've taken is, because of the nature of what rap music is, and because it's very much led by the lyrics of young people, just by putting a piece of music on, or real rap beat, which is a more relaxed beat, where it just implies express more emotions that you're feeling. So many instances where young people who would really not want to engage in a lot of things are really expressing a lot, which they wouldn't want to say. And that's where it's not, here is a exercise of a therapeutic exercise, but actually it's more impactful because it's culturally aligned with what they approach the kind of art form with, and that just inevitably results in, I'm actually talking about some issues which I'm struggling to verbalize, but through a creative form I can.
Just from a research perspective, Alf Gabrielson did many, many years of research into performance and emotion. And what he found was that teaching his undergraduate musicians about emotion consciously gave them much more manageability of the musical material, perform music in lots of different ways to express particular kinds of emotions, because most of the time they didn't know that they had an emotional correlate for their music. So the question is not that we have to teach well-being, but we certainly have to teach about music and emotion in our music sessions. And one of the other things that came out more recently from colleagues in Jyväskylä in Finland is that sometimes young people, particularly adolescents, they actually like music which magnifies a negative emotion. When they're really feeling down, they sometimes want to listen to music which seems to make that, or at least from the outside, even worse, but actually is a cathartic response. It's a release of some of that kind of emotion.
To add to what Graham was saying, completely, that phenomenon of using music just to listen to express their emotions is almost, I feel particularly nowadays, that kind of, here's an armor of, I'm not creating this, I'm not saying anything, but this reflects my feeling in a way which feels less exposing. I think that's a core element. Sorry, Baz.
Just to respond to the question, really, which is just to say that if it is a part of the music education, it is part of a picture of music making and singing, which is part of the culture of the school. And if that's not in place, actually wellbeing is a good way in, because there's so much evidence about the value of it. It's as good a reason as any to get singing happening across the school or across a group of schools.
Great. And like so many evolutions or improvements in the way we do things to include people, it benefits everybody. So if we make our classrooms and schools places that nurture everyone's well-being, it benefits everybody, whether they thought they needed their well-being nurturing or not, I would think. We've got a question from Jeremy Sleeth, who is the chair of the Sing Up Foundation and on whose watch all of this work has been done, which is tremendous. So we're very grateful for that, Jeremy. And the question is, in the first case addressed to Benjamin, it is, what could the Sing Up Foundation seek to create that would enable others to recreate that safe, unedited place for young people to be themselves? I wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
I mean, I think the first thing is, I think Sing Up already has some really a growing breadth of resources. I know we were involved in helping develop a rap resource just to make sure that there's a range of different kind of cultures reflected in the resource. But in terms of, and this kind of ties to another question that I saw around training for teachers or vocal coaches, and I think a lot of it comes down to just training programs, but not necessarily in the sense of we need to understand this element or this element of well-being. It's around the need for cultural humility, I think, is a really important aspect. I feel also the positionality of the teacher in terms of, and this kind of links to the repertoire question as well. There have been times where I know I could make, and I use that word very specifically, a group of young people do a choir performance song because I am a teacher who they respect and they're going to engage and they're going to do this, and I can list all the benefits. But the moment that I can allow myself to pause and just think, why this versus what they might want to do instead? What is it that I'm actually trying to teach? Is it that I am trying to open the breadth of different music available to them? Or is it that I'm actually, my view of breadth of music is my music adding onto there as well? Actually, within their breadth of music, there is so much to be explored. It's like the perspective of, so many young people want to be the next Stormzy or want to be the next pop artist, but they don't know how to get there. And yet often what we do is we think, okay, we need to expand beyond that when we haven't even covered the core part of what they're really passionate about. So I think a lot of it comes down to just our approach and particularly the cultural humility.
Lacey Jam says, kids in my classes up until the age of 8 to 9 are quite receptive and do call and response, learn songs in foreign languages, etc. However, after age of 9, and obviously around puberty, 11 to 12 years and on, the age of shame kicks in, and it's extremely tough to have students engaged, even if they might enjoy the music. Do you have any suggestions? So that's from Lacey Jam.
I think it chimes with what we said earlier and what the report says, is that there will be some music somewhere that resonates with that particular individual. Most young people will listen to music. Some of them, the research tells us, up to 5 hours a day. So if there is music which makes sense for you, then part of the role of the adult is to find out, explore what that music is, or to provide a very large, if you like, menu of activities so that this music kind of pops up. And I'm saying that as someone with a 14-year-old at home who's into heavy metal, but who is also willing to try out more classical pieces and realizes that whatever the musical skills are that he's developing on one instrument might actually be applied to another and to other kinds of musics. Every child, young person, I think, will have some kind of musical hook. the challenge for us is to discover what it is.
I mean, I think the primary to secondary shift is a significant and quite long-term issue. Like, it's been a thing for a long time, that kind of drop off in engagement. And I think ultimately, from what I've found, it comes down to a core principle, which is the social cost, and that being a new thing that is developed. So in the primary school environment or younger environment, it's very it's a very different cultural ecosystem to the secondary school environment, to being introduced to the digital environment. And suddenly the social cost of choice is massive. It's the reason why in year 7, it's the reason why in every school that I've taught in, our choir is mostly year 7. And then you've got a couple of year 9s and year 10s in it. And then for the most part, they're either there as I'm the excellence example or I'm the leadership example. So they almost have an excuse to be part of the choir because they need to have something to balance the social cost. And that massive shift there of just being aware of how you're viewed and aware of what it means. But in terms of kind of kind of approach to it, I think a big part as well is the need that young people have, and I think many people have, but particularly in the modern kind of world that they're growing up in, is that need for success and that need for quality. And a lot of the time, kind of mediocrity is kind of the lens through which we approach a lot of music programs. While what I've found with a lot of the programs we've done is we need to start from a space of here's excellence and we're going to go for this excellence. Doesn't mean we're actually intending that for young people. It's almost like, okay, right, I can now allow the social cost of being involved in this just because it's presenting itself as an excellent program, even though we all kind of know this is just a space for you to create and to have fun. And so I think that kind of, right, this is an excellence thing. And then also, of course, giving them ownership. I really think youth ownership, and more than leadership, more than voice, but actual ownership is a massive part of the shift required.
And I'm really interested to hear you make that connection between, as it were, bridging that transition and excellence. And I think it just behooves us to remember that we should never underestimate young people's own discernment and own capacity to choose. And somebody somewhere in the report, and I can't remember which person, but one of the many excellent quotes in the report is about basically you can't pull a fast one on young people. They will discern inauthenticity. And so, I think one of the other things about it is to show up with what you love and are willing to share, and also to be willing to receive from the young people, so that you're not pretending to like something if you don't like it as well. I think young people value response that is honest and debate that is honest, and quality in whatever the thing is well understood by young people and sought after by young people, because it makes us feel good to be able to do something well. This is, we're now talking about, if you like, a much broader pedagogical view, which is to do with how teaching and learning can best happen for everybody.
So Kathy's question is, are we able to authentically support facilitators, teachers, music specialists to develop a real trauma-informed approach? How can we ensure that practice is trauma-informed? Are there enough training courses or guides? Do we have enough adult resource to support groups truly to ensure that a setting is safe?
So, trauma-informed practice.
I can quickly respond on trauma informed, and I think for the foundation there is a role in that as part of a portfolio of things we might be able to offer. But that's a partnership thing, and when I've worked in for example with care experienced young people, the courses that always sold out were the trauma informed ones. So there is a desire as well as a need for that, and I think that's something we can straightforwardly build in as part of an offer.
Great. And I'm just going to follow that up actually with Emily Bell's question, which is, what training do you think vocal leaders and singing teachers should be getting as a bare minimum, even if their practice isn't centered around well-being? So it's, how do we build this up? Graham, Benjamin, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, my first thought was, I wonder what the correspondence is between the report and the pyramid, and the main Sing Up set of resources. So I think there's probably picking up Jeremy's point that there's a kind of useful mapping that could go on there to see whether the resources are rich enough to work across the pyramid. And I think the word trauma then for me is focusing on particular aspects of the pyramid. And as Baz said, that really needs to be worked out with professionals who are experts in that field, in which you bring in the singing professionals together and say what's needed. And that group should also have some practitioners and saying, well, this is where we're coming from. But you could have a very fruitful, I think, positive engagement in taking the agenda forward in that way.
And I would say that the question of support, training and development, continuing development and support for anybody working with singing and vocal practice more widely with young people is a question that needs constant attention. It doesn't just need attention in the particular case of singing for mental health. It just needs attention because it slips off the agenda and slips off the agenda. Paradoxically, perhaps because we do all have a voice, it somehow feels like it's the thing that is least attended to in teacher education because it's least valued. Benjamin, any thoughts about trauma-informed or related topics?
Yeah, the model that we take is that all of our young leaders who are now working in schools with young people are alumni of our program, which I think just highlights that that kind of relational aspect is so crucial. They might not have had the same training as other teachers or as myself, but they're much better skilled because they're starting from who they are and what they are bringing in relation to the young people. Now, that's definitely not me saying that you cannot be completely culturally different to the young people you support. I'm very culturally different to all the young people that I'm working with. But I also think the framework that the report has, do, know, be, I think if anything, I'd say really starting with that be, with that understanding of who you are in that space, and then adding on with the know, I think it's that, like I've said a few times, that cultural awareness and that really understanding where am I bringing myself and my values versus where am I supporting this problem. Right now, we've been having a lot of conversations about masculinity, and a lot of the time we have to keep pausing to think, at what point are we addressing a harm versus are we trying to shift towards our values? And I think that that's just really important for anyone in a position of power, with especially young people, to be thinking, what is the healthy norm that we're aiming for, rather than where are we bringing our ideal into it. Not trying to say ideals are wrong, but just trying to make sure we understand where we are crossing that boundary, which can be a positive thing as well, but just being aware of that.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to read out the point that Jeremy Sleeth has just made in the chat on this point of training and support for staff. I think we have a responsibility for support and supervision of our staff in the same manner as those working in mental health within the NHS get. This will take a shift in employer working practice in some cases, especially in the mainstream, and may be a place that we could collectively lobby for. And earlier on, there were some questions and comments about policymakers and funders who absolutely would need to come into this conversation. I'm just going to give you one question, Benjamin, which is a question of factual definition. Can you just clarify for some of our viewers, what is the difference between youth ownership and youth leadership?
Ooh, I've not actually been asked that many before. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say youth leadership is being responsible for others. It's being a leader. And that's why you can have a program which is a young person doesn't really love, but they can be a leader within it. And ownership is essentially, this is mine. This is my thing that I'm building, that I'm part of. And it is, I think, quite a significant difference between the two. But yeah, that's essentially, in a nutshell, the difference.
Great, thank you. And I guess just to further complicate the picture, I would perhaps throw in the word agency there. So at what point does a young pupil feel an agent or the creator, curator, or leader of their own experience? And I guess my take on all of what we've heard to date is that we're in continuum land with all of these things. It's about I think one of the early youth music, National Foundation for Youth Music resources, offered an idea about a kind of a mixing desk, old-fashioned, analog mixing desk approach to pedagogy, which is you need some of this and you need some of that, and in some situations you need more of this and you might need a bit less of that, and how we think about the mix that we need for the young people we're working with and how we think about the mix of what we need for ourselves as practitioners perhaps is a big question for us to go forward with. Huge research agenda unfolding. Graham and all colleagues on screen who might help to support developing and funding that research agenda. Huge training, support and development agenda. Similarly, anyone who's got some help to offer and how we might build that, and a conversation unfolding. I just want to put a question out to everyone on screen, and my invitation to you all is to answer this in the chat stream, which is, what is one thing that you're going to go and do as a result of being involved in this conversation, or you would suggest someone else might like to go and do? Could be reading, doing, connecting with, finding out about, touching into. I'm conscious there were one or two questions about repertoire and resources that we didn't get round to answering. Please stay connected through all of the means that we have, and those things can be more fed back on and responded to. So I would love to see your answers in the chat as to what are you going to do next, or what would you like to suggest somebody else might like to do next as a result of being in this conversation. But meanwhile, I'm going to ask Benjamin Graham. Oh, Baz has already told us he's going to find a trauma-informed practice trainer. Graham and Benjamin, what are you going to do next as a result of this conversation? Graham, what are you going to do next?
Well, one of the challenges with the research is that we know that as children get older and become adolescents, they often become musically more competent, but become more unhappy. And so one of the challenges I think that I'm continuing to research is how we can use music and singing as that preventative measure.
Great.
And I think there's a lot of research that we need to continue to do that, particularly with young people in that transition, as Benjamin said, that we may get a kind of positivity that transfers from year 6 to year 7.
Right.
But year 7 onwards, it might be more problematic.
Cut you off because time is not on our side right now. Benjamin, what are you going to do next?
Yeah, so we're already doing a lot of research into this, so I would welcome any researchers, obviously Graham yourself. I'd love to be in conversation. We're exploring the exact things you talked about. And just a challenge I'd say for everyone is to really change the lens we're looking at young people, and to maybe consider how much are they disengaging and how much are they adapting to a new environment that they're living in. And how much of that is reflected, I think, in that report it's all quite clearly there. But it's just, how can we change the lens and start looking at what they're doing as adapting?
Great, thank you. So keep the chat comments in. Somebody else's action might be a great one that you'd like to adopt for yourself. Baz, Sally, would you like to close us out, please?
Yes, great. Well, first of all, just a huge thank you to Katherine and our wonderful panelists. Thank you for bringing the broader context of this publication to life. It is, after all, really a lot of text and some images, so that's really helped. And on that, you can now access the report from the link that we've sent. It is 40 pages long, and although it's nicely designed, we're going to be spending some time breaking it down on the website and allowing people to go in their own way and in their own pace to find out different things from it. So it will help to bring it to life. And also we will be scheduling some future webinars, hopefully the next one in July, to take out specific aspects of this and explore them in more detail. Stuff around the workforce and the practitioner is probably going to be top of our list for that. Sally?
Great.
I'm just sharing here. There's a link. You can click on it right now to download the report. And also, if you can please, because we're planning on doing some more webinars to explore all of these things, and actually following up on what Benjamin was saying earlier about our Do No Be work, that's going to be the next big thing we're going to start developing. So we really want to have you guys join us for that. So if you can also, 2 minutes to fill out this survey to let us know how you like this webinar, because we thought it was amazing. But we'd love to know how we can make it better. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to the panel. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, brilliant. So to everyone who's joined us from the audience, thank you so much, and do stay in touch. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.